Good evening, everyone. This evening, I'm very excited to have Marcel Dixon. He will be running and trying to take Jim Clyburn's 6th district in South Carolina seat. Would you like to introduce yourself, Marcel?
Hello, everyone. Marcel Dixon here. I'm a teacher in the very rural county of Jasper in South Carolina, coastal, where I was raised, and I have lived my entire life, and I'm happy to be here with everyone.
Well, we're glad to have you. So, first questions first. Why are you essentially trying to be a member of Congress in South Carolina and essentially take Jim Clyburn's seat?
Well, I felt that this is a calling for me. I felt that it finds me. I My county has had the same representative, Mr. Clyburn, for the last 30 years. And I want this statistic to settle in with people. After being in power for 30 years and representing us, my county is the sixth poorest district. My district, excuse me, is the sixth poorest in the United States of America. 435 districts, and we are the sixth poorest. After 30 years in power, this is the best he has been able to do. My people, my constituents here deserve better than that. And I am running to
Absolutely.
bring us better.
So I know you're running on a reparations ticket, and many people use the term reparations, but a lot of us essentially do not know how to define it. So is there a definition of reparations that you have within your plan? And if you can explain some of your plan, that would be great as well.
So reparations pretty much means the compensation for damage that has been done. That's basically what it is. And that compensation in the regards to Black Americans who are descendants of people who were enslaved by the American government. I will use the term freedmen because on the books of Congress, Black Americans who are descendants of the 4 million people who were emancipated at the end of the Civil War, we are referred to as freemen via the Freedmen Bureau Acts of Congress in 1864 1865 and 1866. So reparations for us means compensation for unpaid wages and other harms that was done to us, government sanctioned, whether that was land theft, whether that was the burning of Black Wall Streets, whether that was exclusion from government policies that put trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars into non-Black Americans, mainly white Americans.
So
And
I
as
know a
far as
lot of
my
people.
plan, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Please continue.
And as far as my plan goes, I'm still working out the final details. It's a living, breathing document, but my plan definitely includes direct monetary payment for the unpaid wages at the very minimum.
So I know a lot. I know a lot of people would like to know what is your lineage and what is your heritage.
Well, I'm a freedman. I'm Gullah Geechee. And for those who do not know the terms Gullah or Geechee, we're also sometimes called Sea Island Creoles. We are descendants of the Africans that were enslaved mainly on the coast of South Carolina and the coast of Georgia, but also northern Florida and the southern tip of North Carolina. We were sought for our rice growing skills, our skills in irrigation and animal husbandry. And because we are in a coastal, very swampy, subtropical area, the enslavers, the white enslavers, were not acclimated to such a climate. But the Africans, who mainly came from the Kingdom of Congo, which is modern day Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Congo, and Angola, and then later on from southern Nigeria and Senegambia, they were acclimated to a subtropical tropical climate. So the whites would usually go inland to higher ground, especially during the spring or summer. But here, it can feel like summer all year round. So we were able to maintain the different tribes that were here from the different parts of the African continent. They were able to maintain a lot of their customs. And of course, they spoke different languages, had different cultural backgrounds. So a Creole culture merged, where these different Africans merge all the different cultures together. And of course, the English culture, which was ruling and imposed upon them, and being here in North America, the Gullah Geechee culture emerged. We have our own language, our own cuisine, our own folklore, our own practices, our own familial traditions and customs, and more. So that is my lineage, complete Black American or freedman. On my mother and father's side, it goes back at least to the mid 1700s, is as far back as I've been able to go.
Okay. Now, I know we touched on reparations a little bit early, but I would like to kind of revisit that because a lot of us use the term reparations and we don't exactly know how much reparations. And I know in order to fix America, you have to fix essentially Black America. So I know a lot of people
Exactly.
like to
That's my
put a number
campaign
on it. Is there
slogan.
a number that we can put on reparations?
There's not a number to which I've committed to yet, but I have spoken with people who are well studied and well researched in this area. And someone gave me this particular number and figure about which to consider. They said in 1865, at the end of the Civil War, there were 4 million Black people enslaved by the American government. If you take those 4 million people who were working 52 weeks every single day for at least 10 hours, we know it was way more than that, just
Absolutely.
being just 10 hours a day, that will be 40 million man hours, meaning 40 million, 4 million people working 10 hours every single day. If you were to pay them at just $10 per hour, that would already put us as far as the worth per person, descendant of those people, at over $1.5 million. And that's just for that year alone. I also have read a book called The Black Tax. If anyone has not read it, I suggest we do. And it says that anti-Black racism has cost this government, has cost this country $16 trillion. Now, the United States of America's GDP as it currently stands is 19.2 trillion, meaning that this country would be twice as rich had it paid Black Americans reparations. But for Black Americans, it has cost us $70 trillion. So even though I have not committed to a number yet, we already know that number is in the high trillions at a minimum of 70 trillion.
I know this particular question is going to come across the table is how are you going to essentially identify foundational Black Americans, descendant of American slaves, freedmen? Is there going to be some sort of database? Is there going to be some sort of DNA check where there's going to be a lineage of sorts? How are we going to be able to identify those people who are direct descendants of American slaves here in the United States of America?
Well, the criteria I like to use is the criteria that is set out in the book From Here to Equality, written by Dr. Darity and his wife, Kirsten Mullen. And it pretty much states that a person has to be a descendant of someone who was enslaved by the American government and will also have had to classify themselves as Negro, colored, Black, African American for at least a decade or more. So that right there is the criteria. How we go about classifying those people is relatively very, very simple. Well, for one, the United States of America, a lot of people like to fret over how you're going to prove that your ancestors were enslaved by this country. But that's very, very easy to do. It will not be done by DNA, because if it was to be done by DNA, that will make this a race issue. But reparations from the American government is not for all quote unquote Black people. It's just for freedmen, the people of the lineage to whom the harm was done. So this is a lineage-based issue. It's not if are you Black, it is are you a descendant of the people who were enslaved by this government and then went through subsequent anti-Black racial terrorism in the forms of Jim Crow, lynch mobs, and redlining. So DNA is out the question. It's about lineage. And here is one way I like to approach it. Rather than trying to make everyone prove that they are a descendant of someone who was enslaved by the American government, which, by the way, is very, very easy to do, and with just a little bit of assistance, those who have yet to do it can easily do it. The American government knows who is in this country illegally and who
Absolutely.
is an immigrant in this country legally. So 90% of Black Americans are freedmen. All we have to do, and this is very easy to do, much easier than people having to search through census records, slave schedules, ship manifests, which, by the way, I still strongly encourage all freedmen to do that so we can learn about our ancestors that came before us. However, all the American government has to do is look at all the Black people in this country, eliminate the 10% that are immigrants, and you already know the remaining are here as freemen because the overwhelming majority of Black people in this country are freemen. Outside of that, however, those resources I mentioned already, census records, slave schedules, sometimes people have personal narratives that are well recorded. Those things can be used as well.
So I guess in that sense, would people have to solidify and verify themselves, or would there be some sort of government system that you can put in place to have that verified?
The good news is there already is a government system, or at least
Okay.
I should say there was. The Freedmen's Bureau existed. And for those who are not familiar with the Freedmen's Bureau was a department of the federal government that was supposed to make sure that freedmen and their descendants, of whom
Right.
we are, whom I am definitely one of, received food, shelter, land, healthcare, and housing. Unfortunately, it was sabotaged by Congress, but it was able to, first of all, help unite families that had been brutally shattered by chattel slavery. A lot of people, Black Americans, were able to have their weddings and marriages officiated via the Freedmen's Bureau. And the Freedmen's Bureau also kept track of a lot of the people who were enslaved that were emancipated. So we have that. But under
Okay.
my plan, the Freedmen's Bureau will be returned to finish the job it was doing to help solidify the protected class status of freemen, because during the era of the Freedmen's Bureau, we were a protected class. The military was in all of the former Confederate states to make sure that our rights were upheld. We may not need that form of protection in our modern era, but the Freedmen's Bureau will still be there to advocate for us. And one way they will be there to advocate for us in the context of reparations is to help people I find and verify their lineage. But obviously, a lot of us, such as I, have records. My great grandmother helped raise me. She died when I was 31 years old at an age 101 in 2015. She was raised by her grandparents, and my great grandfather, well, my great 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 grandfather, Willie Simmons, was formerly enslaved. I have his records and I have proof that he was formerly enslaved. So a lot of us can do that. So we can verify ourselves, or we can get assistance from the Freedmen's Bureau if we believe indeed we are freemen.
Okay. So I know in your overall plan, reparations is head of the ticket, but you have an actual plan. Can you share? Is it possible for you to share some of the things that's in your actual plan that you're willing to do to fix Black America?
Sure. So the first thing on which I'm running, because you said my slogan, so thank you for that, is repair Black America to fix America. So first and foremost, my plan is reparations. And I feel this is very important to explain. So just bear with me 1 second. I want to address the myths that there are out there about reparations, and then I want to contrast that with the facts. One, reparations is not a payment from white Americans to Black Americans for the harms of chattel slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, lynch mobs, and we know the atrocities go on and on and on because there are people out there on both sides, on the so-called far left and definitely the far right, who will have white people who may be open to supporting reparations, thinking that it's a tax on them for the wrongs that their ancestors may or may not have been involved with doing. No, the debt for reparations comes from the institution that had the responsibility to protect us and to make sure that our constitutional rights were upheld, and that is the American government. Okay, so that's myth number one, and that's fact number one. Number two, very briefly, because it's very important that I say these things. Reparations is not going to bankrupt the economy. That's perhaps the biggest lie I hear from people who say they may be open to supporting reparations, but they feel the amount would just be too high. That is a lie. Here are the facts. The American government is a monetary sovereign. Alan Greenspan, Ben Bernanke, those are just two of the individuals who were the chairman of the Federal Reserve, the institution that gives our American government a credit expansion. Both of them have said in various different ways the American government can never run out of money. It can never not afford to pay its bills. And case in point, when the American government wants to fund the military, do they raise our taxes to do so? No. When they sent out the stimulus checks, did they raise our taxes to do so? No. When they increased unemployment due to the American Rescue Plan just last year, did they increase our taxes? No. As a matter of fact, during that time, we were under historic tax cuts from the Trump administration, and we were giving out money. When they bailed out the airline industry, when they bailed out the banks, when they bailed out the auto industry, our taxes were not raised a penny. As a matter of fact, during that time, we were experiencing tax cuts. The American government is a monetary sovereign. It can print its own money at any time it wants. The thing about which we have to be concerned is inflation. But the American government is not financed by tax, not the federal government. States, yes. Federal, no. They know it, and it's a lie they tell people that they need to raise taxes to pay their bills to scare people from doing policies that will help everyone, such as reparations, but many others from supporting. And number three, last but not least, and I want you to reiterate this, reparations does not go to all Black people. It only goes to freedmen, descendants of those who were enslaved by the American government. Okay? So reparations is number one. Number two is I'm also going to reform the system of heirs property. To make it very quick, heirs property is a system where the landowner dies but did not leave a will, and therefore their descendants can never get equity or become owners of that land. They just all have a share in it. But it keeps them from getting the money of the property that that property is worth. Black Americans in particular were forced into this system. We didn't have
Right.
any wealth coming out of slavery. We couldn't read and write. A lot of lawyers would not work with Black families. And in some states, it was all but illegal for Black families to consult with a lawyer. But a study done in Georgia, North Carolina, Alabama, with just 12 random counties, found out that in those counties, just 12, and Georgia has like almost 150 counties, just 12 counties, the worth of the property owned by Black Americans was close to $100 billion. So that's just a sample of how much wealth is being locked up in land owned by Black Americans now. I plan to fix that. Number two, I plan to reform the way we finance our public schools. As it stands now, public schools are financed by property taxes. So you're in a richer area, you're going to be in a more resource plenty school. If you are in a poor area, you're going to be in a more resource deprived school. But really, the kids in the poorer areas usually need more resources. I plan to have it where there will be a state standard, and each county can contribute what they can from property taxes to meeting that state standard for each child to have a quality education. But where they are not able to meet that state standard, the federal government will close that gap. Transportation is the other issue. I support the expansion of public transportation features such as high rail and expanding bus routes, but in rural areas, in the district in which I am running to represent in Congress, South Carolina District 6, is 97% rural. Something as simple as a flat tire can put a family beneath the poverty line. But some families
Absolutely.
don't even have the luxury of owning a vehicle. So I feel the way there is assistance for people to become homeowners, there needs to be assistance for people to become owners of vehicles. And we know there's a lot of talk about defunding the police. I'm not a fan of defunding the police. Let me just say that. I'm a fan of holding the police accountable. And I am a fan because what people really mean when they say defund the police, they mean fund the issues that cause a lot of communities to be riddled with crime to begin with. So let's fund having access to health care that includes mental health as well. Let's fund quality child care that is accessible to every single person that needs it. Let's fund support systems for families, not just to show up and take their children away and be punitive, but to support a family before their head is underwater and they are overwhelmed with problems. So those are just a
If I
few of
may
the
ask,
issues. Mhm.
if I may ask, Marcel, so if you're not looking to defund the police, what is your stance on qualified immunity?
We absolutely should repeal qualified immunity. We absolutely should. But to me, that's a low ball. Okay. If you shoot and kill someone I love, I want to be more than able to just sue you. I want to be able to do more than that. That you need to be in prison. So I have a part of my plan, a push to amend the Constitution. The Constitution does speak about the limits of use of force by police officers, where it says that they cannot deprive a person of their right to liberty, freedom, and there's a few other verbiage there which I'm not familiar. It says they cannot knowingly do so. It's hard to prove that they had the intent to do so. We know intent is extremely hard to prove. I am going to push changing the language from knowingly depriving someone of their rights to recklessly, meaning even if you did not mean to do it, as a trained professional, and police officers are trained professional, you should have known better. When you give me a license, there's a charge such as called reckless driving, meaning I didn't intend to hurt anyone or cause an accident, but I should have known better. And when I took the license and I got behind the wheel of that car, I was entrusted with being a responsible driver. Police officers have a great responsibility, and they have a right to use lethal force if necessary. Anyone who has such a right to do something as irreversible as taking someone's life, they should want to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. That means if you recklessly hurt someone or, God forbid, kill them, you should want to be held accountable for that. So that's what I push. Qualified immunity, repealing that, I'm for that. But we should also take it a step further and prove that if your actions recklessly endanger someone's life or, God forbid, takes their life, you should be held accountable.
So when we look at the state of Black America in dealing with law enforcement, there's been a lot of cases, of course, with excessive use of excessive force. But is there anything you have exclusively for Black Americans that is essentially like a class protection, the same thing they gave the Asians, the 8-time hate bill? Do you have anything like that in your plan?
That's exactly what my plan. Matter of fact, you go to my plan, A Better Deal for Black America, federal class protected status for freedmen is one of the first things I had. I want to repeat what I said earlier. We had it in the 1800s. I want you to just let that marinate for a minute. In the 1800s, coming after the Civil War, where racial tension and violence was at all-time high, freedmen had class protected status. We literally had the military there to make sure that our rights were respected. It is crazy to think in 2022, with all these Black representatives in Congress, that we are actually less protected now, even though the census undercounts us. So I'm not going to entertain that 13% number, even though we're between 15 to 20% of the population. And what? There are over 50 elected people in Congress that are Black. I'm not sure if they're all freedmen, but I know some are. And they were able right away after 2 weeks of hate crimes to get an Asian hate bill, because read the language, that's pretty much what it is,
Pretty
passed.
much.
But for Black Americans, after 500 years, we have nothing. And I know they just passed the anti-lynching bill, but that doesn't specify us. My plan will specify freemen as a protected class status, meaning that we will have rights that are exclusively to us, of which we cannot be deprived. We will have provisions set aside for us, like Native Americans have, that we have been excluded from, even though we have been recipients of government sanctioned violence and injustice as well. So, absolutely, that is a part of my plan.
Now, before we cover Jim Crow Clyburn, I would like to ask you, I would like to ask you what we're going to do with the Congressional Coon Caucus. Do you have any plans to maybe replace some of the members or restructure how they essentially go about things, because they mostly do things for immigrants and not for Black Americans?
On that note, if you look at the Asian American and Pacific Islander caucuses page, you will see they specify Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. If you go to the Hispanic caucus, and Hispanic is an ethnicity, it's not a race. But if
Correct.
you look at the Hispanic community, you can see the type of Hispanics they're really vouching for. And hint, they don't look like you and I, even though there are many of them that do. They are specifying provisions and policies just for Hispanics. For some reason, you go to the Congressional Black Caucuses page, and they on there talking about people of color. I have no intention to try to reform the way they operate. I
Okay.
plan to start a freedmen caucus that is going to truly be dedicated to advocating for our needs. So, alongside the Freedmen's Bureau, which, by the way, Joe Biden, who said he had our backs, he can really bring back the Freedmen's Bureau right now via executive order, because all he has to do is write an executive order and give it to one of the many executive agencies under him. It could be the Department of Transportation, it could even be the
Absolutely.
Department of Education, and he can direct them to look into disparities that impact freedmen and to implement or to come up with policies that can be implemented or that he can advocate for Congress to pass. He can easily do that with a signature. He's done that for Asians. He's done that for Hispanics. He's even done that for illegal immigrants who are not even citizens. It's just, I just want people to be aware of that. I plan
Okay.
to start the Freedmen Caucus. I did not run to just jump in a system that has not been working and to try to make it work for my people. I am running to change the system to make it work for my people. And the Congressional Black Caucus is a vestige of a system that has failed Black Americans. I plan to start the Freedmen Caucus to look out for Black Americans, because until Black Americans get their due, this country is never going to truly have peace.
Now, before we move on to Jim Crow Clyburn, I would like to show a proper introduction. When you question Clyburn, and essentially he didn't know exactly what to say, so I would like to show that video to the viewers here so they can understand and get some context and background of essentially how he couldn't answer some of the basic questions that you had for him. So let's look into that video here.
We're coming too often, the politicians that say they speak for us never want to speak to us. So I think we should thank them for being here. We should thank them for being here. Congressman Clyburn, I love this handout, but it's missing one thing, and I'm gonna try not to get emotional, but I want to read it. In 2019, the average, and I know you know these statistics, the average wealth of the average white American family is $188,000. For Black American families, it's only $24,000. Now, I'm Gullah, okay? 80% of rural land, Black land ownership,
has been lost since 1969. A white high school dropout has more wealth than a black college graduate. Per the Accountable USA and the Food and Research Action Center, your district and the district I've grown up in is the sixth poorest district in the United States of America.
Which is it? The sixth district?
South Carolina District 6. Now, there's a quote, and maybe that's not true.
He acted like he didn't know what he heard.
There's a quote.
Right.
I
He was
do not
surprised I knew it.
census data, but there's a quote that says, "I do not buy the concept popular in the 1960s, which said we have suppressed the black man for 300 years, and the white man is now far ahead in the race for everything our society offers. In order to even the score, we must now give the black man a head start, or even hold the white man back to even the race. I don't buy that. I'll be damned if I pay for the sins of my forefathers. I don't feel responsible for the sins of my forefathers. I just feel responsible for now." Now, hearing that quote, y'all might think I'm talking about Donald Trump. No, that was Joe Biden. Now, Congressman, you said we know Joe and Joe knows us. And Joe Biden told us that he would have our backs. But since being in office, Joe Biden has signed executive action for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. He has signed executive action for LGBTQ citizens. He has done executive action for Native Americans. But where's his executive action for Black Americans? Now, what a lot of people may not realize, I don't know, but I just learned this. Funny thing, Joe Biden got in office and he repealed a lot of stuff Donald Trump did. For a man who said he wasn't concerned with the sins of forefathers, he's sure repealing past sins of Donald Trump. But what about the biggest sin and the original sin this country committed, which was the brutal enslavement of my people? And after slavery, the race massacres, the violent discrimination that kept us in poverty, the land theft, okay? We, Black Americans, now, since 1865, Black Americans own only 0.5 wealth in America. Today, we own less than 3%. Since slavery, not much has changed. Joe Biden could easily do executive action and bring back the Freedmen's Bureau, whose job was to close all disparities between Black Americans, who are descendants of freedmen, and white Americans. Joe Biden, with just a stroke of a pen, can start a commission to study reparations and implement them. You are a representative. We can't show up everywhere. People say, well, Black people need to organize. We've been organizing since the 1500s. These other groups come in like Asian Americans, and within a few months, they get bills for them. It's your job to speak up for us. So you say we know Joe and Joe knows us. I don't care what type of heart Joe has. I care about the policies Joe is going to pass. So why is it, Congressman Clyburn, that you do not support reparations and you do not push Joe Biden to at least bring back the Freedmen's Bureau to close all disparities between white Americans and Black Americans? We talk about a crisis at the border. What about the crisis in Black America? That was the difference is the crisis in Black America was inflicted on us externally. Well, America was built on our back, and we still hold this country up on our backs. It's broken every bone in our bodies, and yet it keeps up with our strength. Okay, well, can you please explain why you haven't pushed them then on executive action, specific policies for your people, Black Americans? That's my question. I don't get it.
What makes you think I have it?
Because we haven't seen it. I see you on the news, and you talk about every other issue, AAPI, LGBTQ. I watch you. I follow you just to see if you're going to mention Black American issues, and you don't.
Have you ever heard of HR 40?
Yes. HR 40, yes, that lacks direct cash payments and has no specific, that lacks direct cash payments. It lacks specific policies that Black Americans are supposed to get. It's just a study, but what policy is it specifying for us?
When you start?
We start with the minimum that Black Americans are supposed to get.
Answer the question. Now, where would you start?
I would start with the minimum, that a reparations policy for Black Americans.
How do you know what the minimum is?
I'm trying to answer your question. You gonna let me answer it? Where would I start?
Tell me what the minimum is.
The minimum There's a book called From Here to Equality that you have a copy of because the Mystic Branch NAACP sent you a copy because I called your office. The minimum is explained in that book, at least $11 trillion, direct cash payments, land allotment, tax exemption, free education, the Freedmen's Bureau returning to close all disparity. That's the minimum. This country can't bring back all the people they've taken from us, but they can at least make a big down payment, like the $65 billion, give us our $65 trillion.
Okay.
I'm running out of space.
Just wanna figure this out.
I'm running out of space.
Well, that's saying a mouthful, Marcel. So we understand that Jim Clyburn, unfortunately, has a lot of power and a lot of influence. And, you know, he's been in Congress, for the past 4 decades or so. How are you planning to remove his foreign seat? And I know you need a lot of support in this, but what are some of your plans in order to essentially remove this guy?
Well, one, education. Okay. I need people to, if you listen to that video, did you hear people gasp audibly when I was reading
Absolutely.
all statistics?
In the beginning, yes.
Exactly. I always use the analogy of a flea circus. A flea circus is started when people put a fleas in a box, they put a lid on. At first, the fleas try to escape, but after about an hour, you take the lid off and they no longer try to escape. That is the condition of a lot of voters, especially in South Carolina District 6. We have become so accustomed to the poverty here, to the troubled schools here, to the homelessness here, to the lack of opportunities here, to the lack of infrastructure here, that we have come to normalize this. And even though people may know that we deserve more, they don't realize how bad off we really are. So education is very important. Letting people know our current status. 2, letting people know his record. As I said, starting off, he's had 30 years of representing us, and we are the 6th poorest district out of 435. After 30 years, I'm a teacher.
And that's in the entire U.S., correct?
Exactly. Out of the entire United States of America. I'm a teacher. If I had 30 students, and after 30 years, only 6 of them could read, would you give me 2 additional years to try to get it right then? No. So I'm letting people see that you have a choice to make. He's had 30 years to get it right. People want to talk about experience. He has experience. He knows his way around Washington, D.C. But what good has that done us? So people have a choice. If you want what we've been getting, where Black Americans have the shortest lives, Black men have the shortest lives of all demographics, we own less homes now than our grandparents did during the 1960s, when it was legal to discriminate against us. And for white Americans who may think this doesn't concern them, during the Trump administration, sociologists came up with a new term. They call it deaths of despairs, to try to describe the high number of mainly white men, middle-aged white men, dying by suicide, alcoholism, and drug overdose. And the reason they identify is because they are seeing less and less opportunities for white people without a college degree. Whereas they used to be able to get jobs and take care of family without a college degree, they are seeing those jobs evaporate. Those are the type of conditions that have existed under people like Mr. Clyburn. So if people want more of that, by all means, vote for him. But if you want better and you know we deserve better, voting for me is how we get better. That's one thing I do. And 2, I don't write off anyone. I talk to Black people who are very liberal. I speak to white people, because I'm in South Carolina, obviously, who are extremely conservative. And guess what? When I speak to them, I don't back down from reparations. I let them know that if you are white, you should be the first person pushing for reparations. I let them know that, 1, we need you to help get reparations done. Okay? We can do it without you, but we need you to get reparations done, because with white people's support, it can happen that much more quickly. And I let them know what I said at the beginning of this interview. This country would have been twice as rich, at least, if reparations had been done in 1865. So if you are a white person and you bring home $1,000 each week, I imagine bringing home $2,000 now. And that's just if we would have done reparations in 1865. Black Americans, as of now, putting around $3 to $4 trillion into this economy, and that's with us having the lowest amount of wealth. Average American family is $122,000 of net worth. Black Americans just $24,000. We've lost 80% of our land since 1969 while being the most loyal Democratic voters. And yet we still put $3 to $4 trillion into the economy. Imagine what we'd be able to do if we have gotten reparations like we should have. So I let these white conservatives know that one, there are some areas where we can agree. I'm never going to back down for reparations for my people. But I also don't support abortion because most Black women say they get abortions because of poverty. And my attitude is if the Democrats, and I'm not a fan of the other Republicans either, but this is an area where we may be able to agree. If the Democrats care so much about us as Black Americans, and I'm running as a Democrat, I'm running the way a Democrat should run, putting your most loyal voters first, and that's Black Americans. Instead, the Democrats put first people who can't even vote, like illegal immigrants. So if Black American women are saying
So
that
let me ask you that. Let me ask you that very quickly. You touched on something, Marcel, because in modern day times with 100,000 Afghans coming over here, we know we're about the influx of Ukrainians. You know,
Yep.
Fit Nugget, Butter Biscuit Clyburn has done nothing, even though he's the majority whip. So, what is essentially your plan about illegal immigration?
I'm completely against it. If you are illegal in this country and you are apprehended by the authorities and it is discovered you're illegally, you should be deported. There should be no ifs, ands, buts. We don't want to break up families. I'm sorry. A lot of people come to this country illegally. They've already left their families behind in their native countries. But all of a sudden, they break the law, they get apprehended, and now the onus is on us to not want to break up their families. This is funny coming from Joe Biden's administration. This is the same man who wrote the 1994 crime bill for which Clyburn voted that has locked up more Black Americans than any other piece of legislation ever written. Okay? And yet, this is the same man who wanted to give $450,000 per person to illegal immigrants that came here and were separated from their families. So if that's the case, I'm pretty sure I should be expecting a $450,000 check, and perhaps you too. I'm sure we all have had family members locked up for petty crimes, or if they're
Absolutely.
Black men are the most likely to be arrested for crimes they didn't even commit. Where's our $450,000? So I'm against illegal immigration. Every employer should be mandated to use E-Verify, and if they are found not in compliance, they should have the book thrown at them too, because they are encouraging illegal immigration. And just back to my point, something I want to say about that. They say that they don't want to deport people because it will break up their families. Yet, as I was saying about abortion, most Black American women say they will want to keep their kids, but it's because of poverty. And what's the response from the Democrats? They put over 80% of abortion clinic in Black neighborhoods. We can't get good schools. We can't get good infrastructure. We can't get well-paying jobs. We can't get access to university education. We can't get protection. We can't even get clean water. Because here in Clyburn's district, Charleston, South Carolina, has the worst water in the entire country. And Denmark,
Wow.
South Carolina, has where water has been having an untested contaminant put in it for the past 10 years. But they give us abortion clinics. Yet those same people will turn around and say because of having children, they can't deport people in our country illegally. So it's important for every other group to keep their children. But for us, they want to make it easier for us to get rid of our children. I'm a fan of doing something about the poverty for which why most Black women and white women too, and women of other ethnic or racial groups, most women, period, say it's economic hardships that usually leads to them wanting to have an abortion. Instead of making it easier for them to abort their child, let's make this country a more livable country where people want to have a child, they don't have to worry about feeding that child and clothing that child.
Okay. So we know a lot of times, especially Black Americans, we know so often that when we put people in office without a vote, that they change their tune. We understand that you're part of the LGBT community. We understand that Jim Clyburn just gave Kiowa Indians reparations. How do we know that Marcel Dixon will not change his tune, change his platform, change the way he's running once he gets into office?
I'm smiling because that's the question I get asked the most, and I understand why. Because we as Black American, we have post-traumatic stress
Slave
disorder
syndrome.
from and that too, from all the hell we've been through in this nation and all the sellouts we've had. Here's what I say to people, and this is a quote I want people to remember: a person who will sell out to get to where they're going is a person who will sell out once to arrive at where they were trying to go. I want to say this. I've had several Democratic nonprofits who want to promote Democratic candidates, political action committees. I've had strategists reach out to me, and they all have wanted me to do several things that will put me more in alignment with the typical Democrat. One group wanted me to renounce that I am against not just illegal immigration, I'm also for lowering levels of legal immigration, because until we invest more in American citizens, Black Americans, freemen first and foremost, but all American citizens, how dare us import immigrants here to do jobs that we can invest in American citizens to do? And of course, my abortion stance. I'm not against abortion completely. In certain circumstances, it's something that has to be considered. But just willy-nilly aborting a child because it's my right? No, that is something that I do not support. They wanted me to renounce that, and they will continue working with me and helping me to raise funds. And I'm a true grassroots candidate, as you can tell. I don't have any crew here. I don't have anyone right here to the side of
And it
me
also
telling me,
seems like
hey,
you don't lean left, you don't lean right, you don't even lean to the center. It seems like, I know that you're running on again, reparations first, but you do have others, you have other constituents in your district that are non-Black. What about for them?
so let me answer your question about not selling out first. I want to
Sure.
say those Democrat strategists and those organizations have all come to me, wanted me to abandon reparations or not say it as much, or they wanted me to renounce that I'm against illegal immigration, which how can I be a lawmaker and be for breaking the law? Or they wanted me to renounce abortion, and I told them no, and they've dropped me. So I've stuck to my guns running, and I'm going to stick to my guns when I get there. Now, to answer your second question, I want to reiterate the point. Reparations is the best thing I can do for everyone in this country. Only an anti-Black bigot will be against it. And we know during the Bacon's Rebellion, where there were poor whites who were actually going to ally with Black Americans, freedmen, we know the richer whites came and said, huh, you're white, you're better than them. And that was all it took for some of the poor whites who were once going to ally themselves with the freedmen to separate themselves. So if you're one of those white people, you're beyond hope. I can't do nothing for you, and I ain't gonna try. But for white people who are fair-minded, reparations will help you. Citigroup Financial, I'm gonna repeat this statistic. They have one of the largest banking systems in the world. So if you don't trust this study, you might want to go check with whom you're banking, because I promise you it's probably one of their banks, and you probably want to pull all your money out. If you can trust them with your money, you can trust their studies. They did a study, again, showing that had Black Americans been giving equity and equality, this country will be twice as rich. We already say that America's the wealthiest, most powerful nation. We already have all types of innovative industries in this country. The first country to clone an animal. I mean, the first country to put someone on the moon. Imagine how many more industries we would have been able to finance and how many more employed people there would have been had we been twice as rich. Imagine all these white people out there who own businesses and invest in infrastructure. That will be just many more people to support your endeavors, because of course as Black Americans, we're entrepreneurs, we're going to start our own businesses, but of course we're going to have to shop and support others as well. It's just the way this country works. We're so interconnected. So that's the first thing. Reparations is something that only free men are going to receive, but it's going to help everyone. And if you are a white person and you really care about America, the first thing you should be doing is pushing reparations, because countries as big as ours, they don't collapse from the outside, they collapse from within. And I'm trying to repair Black America to fix this country so it don't collapse. Now, the other things that are going to help people my transportation policy. Okay. My transportation policy, another part of it, other than the helping people become vehicle owners, I also plan to help people who qualify for assistance with vehicle maintenance. Meaning, I'm going to partner with a lot of these small car garages because auto mechanics is a very popular field in my district. Whereas a person has wear and tear in their vehicle, from oil changes, the flat tires, the shocks, they will get paid by the government to fix and help maintain these vehicles. I plan to partner with small farmers because farming is still a big industry in my district, where we are going to feed our children. If we can bail out the banks and the auto industry and the airline industry and the real estate industry and the tech industry, we can afford to feed our children and qualifying families. That will help employ a lot more people in the farming industry and the agricultural industry. I also have my better plan for thriving communities, where I feel we all need to adopt a living wage. Minimum wage for me is just meaning you can't pay any lower than this. But a living wage is different because what's considered good money in South Carolina won't be considered necessarily good money in California. And I'm running as
Right.
a national candidate. So a living wage is something that's right away going to be able to help all families. I believe in a public option because I believe people should have choices. If you like your employer provided, healthcare, fine with me. But there should be an option where people who are struggling or people who simply will prefer that public option be able to take care of it. A lot of people go bankrupt over medical costs, and that's just not the way it should be. So my platform is filled with universal policies that will really help everyone. But here's the thing I want to be very clear about. Universal policies are supposed to help everyone, and historically they have, except Black people, because when the Homestead Act was giving away tens of millions of acres, and today 60 million middle class, upper class white families can trace their wealth to the Homestead Act, where the government literally gave away land for a small fee and an agreement to pretty much cultivate that land. Black Americans were all but left out of it, either through economic exclusion or through violence. The GI Bill, which gave 14 million white veterans led access to college, home loans, business loans, pension, healthcare. Black veterans, like my great grandfather, who's still living, he left South Carolina, moved to New York City, he's still alive, were excluded from it. So whereas the white veterans, alongside whom he fought, were able to buy homes to which they later used to put their children through college, and their children became doctors and physicists and all these other type of careers. My great grandfather was not able to leave a thing for my grandmother. For my father, we inherited the poverty that was imposed upon him. So I want to be very clear. When people ask me what policy I have that will help everyone, I am always clear to make it known reparations is for everyone and have universal policies. But I always want to point out how unfair it is that what helps Black Americans help everyone, but what has helped everyone has not helped Black Americans. Because with this
Correct.
Asian hate crime bill, no one asked, is this going to lead to even more Black Americans being incarcerated? No one ever asks, what about Black Americans?
Absolutely. So we understand that politicians, anytime they're running for office or any type of office, they're always asking for donations, campaign money. What do politicians essentially, why do they need this money and what do they do with this money?
Starting off, I didn't want to ask for donations. I was like, no, people are struggling. I quickly realized you need to. One, I'm running as a Democrat. If you're running as a Democrat or a Republican, you're called a partisan candidate. You have to pay party dues. That's one. Two, eventually, if your campaign never gets to the point where you need a staff, that usually means, not all the time, because we live in a world where things happen, but that usually means your campaign is not gaining momentum like it should. I once upon a time was doing everything for my campaign. Now I'm to a point where I can't. And my campaign manager, Oz, the man works a full-time job, okay? And he does that of his own volition. But there are other people now who have to call people for me, who have to get materials print for me, who have to deal with logistics. A lot of them can't do that, even if they wanted to, for free. They have to be paid. Commercials that I'm running on network television and local television. It costs us about, on local television, which costs us more than network, it costs us about $1,500 a week on average to run local commercials. And I'm running local commercials throughout my district, which is a pretty large district. Newspaper advertisements, voter outreach, which means buying voter data, which means sending out text messages to voters, making phone calls, maintaining a phone bank, being able to rent venues. And when people volunteer for me, sometimes being able to take them out to eat, just show my appreciation. Every single thing costs money. My treasurer, I have to pay him. So paying staff, all of those things are the reason why politicians ask for donations. And even though it is votes, I want people to remember this, votes is what wins elections. That's the most important thing. But money helps get the message out so people can know about you and know they have an option to vote, and educate them, and they can be educated and know for whom and for what they are voting.
Well, Marcel, I would thank you for your time, brother. I'm definitely supporting you. I went to your website and I definitely supported you and donated some money there. I thank you for the information, and I believe that a lot of South Carolina should be behind you with this, because this is a no-brainer. Do you have any last comments, and can you essentially tell people how to reach you, please?
I do. So one, you can reach me on Twitter, where I'm most active at Marcel, Marcel, the digit 4, Congress. Okay. Also, if you want to call or text me, even if you want to say, get a job, like I get those ignorant comments sometimes, you can text me. You can call, I won't answer, but you can text me at 843-940-8983. Those are usually comments I get from the conservatives. The comments I get from the so-called liberals are way nastier. Believe it.
And we have your information for your MarcelForCongress.com, also Facebook and Twitter on the screen there for you.
And of course, I need you to please, every single day, if you are active on social media, please tweet out my website, MarcelForCongress.com, and hashtag MarcelForCongress. Marcel for Congress, FOR. Please donate. And the donate is MarcelForCongress.com/donate. And please show as many people as you know about me. If you would like to volunteer, I can never have too many of those, because things are always coming up. Like I said, my campaign is growing larger than I ever imagined it would. I think people are just as excited to have an option besides Clyburn as I am excited to provide a quality option for them.
Well, once again, thank you, Marcel Dixon, for this. I'm surely happy to see another candidate other than fish frying, cat burn, butter biscuit Clyburn. He essentially need to get out of office. He has done nothing for us. And again, brother, please support this brother at his information below. His website, MarcelForCongress.com, Facebook, Facebook.com/Marcel for Congress, and on Twitter, Marcel, the number 4 for Congress. You guys have a great and wonderful night. And again, sir, thank you.
Thank you. You take care. Thank you.